The door on monitor 3 is open, and I locked it 11 minutes ago. And I have the key in my pocket right now, and I can feel it with my fingers through the fabric. And the key is here, and the door is open. And those two facts cannot coexist in any framework I have for understanding how locks and doors and keys work. And I have been an armed security officer for 9 years, and I have a very complete framework for how locks and doors and keys work. And the door on monitor 3 is open, and I locked it 11 minutes ago, and the key is in my pocket, and I am sitting in the control room of an ATM servicing center in Waco, Texas, at 3:14 in the morning, and I am looking at a monitor that is showing me something that is not possible, and the silence of the building around me. The silence of a building full of cash and machinery and locked doors that is supposed to be locked and dark and still has a quality that it did not have 11 minutes ago when everything was correct. A quality of wrongness, a quality of the silence of a space that is no longer entirely unoccupied. A quality that 9 years of armed security work has taught me to recognize as the silence that replaces the correct silence when something has changed in the space around you that you did not authorize and did not cause. I want to tell you about this job with the full weight of its reality before I tell you what happened in it. Because armed security at an ATM servicing center is a job that exists at the specific intersection of significant financial value and significant physical risk and significant isolation. 3 conditions that are not comfortable in combination at any time, and that are least comfortable at 3 in the morning in a building, in an industrial area of Waco that at this hour has no neighboring activity, no foot traffic, no ambient human presence anywhere near the perimeter, nothing between the building and the empty streets around it, but the fencing and the cameras and the locks and me. The ATM servicing center is the facility where cash is prepared, loaded into cassettes, and distributed to ATM machines throughout the region. At any given moment, the vault in this building contains a quantity of cash that I am not permitted to specify, but that is substantial enough to represent a target of significant interest to the kind of people who plan significant crimes, which is why the security apparatus of this facility is what it is, which is comprehensive, which is multiple redundant camera systems and multiple redundant access control systems and armed officers on a 24-hour rotation, and a communication protocol with local law enforcement and private armed response that is designed to respond to a breach faster than a breach can be completed. I have been the overnight officer at this facility for 2 years. Before this, I worked armed security at a series of facilities of varying types and risk levels, starting with a hospital and moving through retail loss prevention and corporate office security, and eventually into the higher security financial and infrastructure work that this job represents. The trajectory of my career has been a trajectory toward more serious facilities and more serious conditions, which is the trajectory of someone who is good at this work and who has developed the specific skill set that serious facilities require, which is the skill set of sustained vigilance, of the ability to maintain genuine attentiveness across 12-hour overnight shifts in buildings that are quiet and still and designed to produce nothing requiring response. So that when something does require response, the response is there, is awake, is functional, is not the response of a person who has drifted through 6 hours of quiet into a state of reduced readiness. Sustained vigilance is the central competency of serious security work, and it is the hardest thing to maintain and the most important thing to have, and the thing that distinguishes the officers who last in this work from the officers who do not. I have it. I know I have it because 2 years of overnight shifts in this facility have not eroded it, And because the moment the door on monitor 3 was wrong, I knew it immediately, without a delay, without a processing period, in the instant the wrong registered. The facility has 42 cameras covering the interior and exterior, organized into 8 monitor groups on the control room display wall, cycling through their views on a timed rotation that I can interrupt to hold any specific view on any monitor. My standard monitoring pattern is a systematic sweep of all camera groups on their rotation cycle, with specific attention to the vault corridor cameras, the loading dock cameras, the perimeter cameras, and the access points, which are the 7 doors of the facility that are equipped with electronic access control, and which I check physically on a rotation that takes me through the building every 90 minutes, checking each door's physical integrity and logging the check in the security management system. I have done this rotation enough times that the building and its 7 access points and their correct states are as familiar to me as the rooms of my own house. And the correct state of door 7, which is the door on monitor 3, is locked, is the heavy steel fire-rated door in the southeast corridor connecting the main facility floor to the loading dock staging area, is the door that I checked and locked and logged at 3:03 in the morning as part of my most recent physical rotation. And the correct state of door 7 is not the state I am looking at on monitor 3 at 3:14, which is open by approximately 8 inches, which is open in the direction that would require someone to have pushed it open from the facility floor side, from the side I just came from the side that my patrol rotation has just covered and found empty. I have already done the check. Before I describe what I do about the open door, I want to tell you that I have already done the first check in my head, have already run through the explanations, have already eliminated the mechanical failure explanation, because the door control system shows door 7 as locked in the access log, shows no access event since my physical log at 3:03, shows no system fault, shows the door as locked in the system even as the camera shows it as open. And the discrepancy between the system showing it locked and the camera showing it open is a discrepancy that eliminates equipment malfunction as a clean explanation, because equipment malfunction does not produce a discrepancy in 2 independent systems in exactly the direction that would indicate someone opening a door that the system shows as remaining locked. And I have already thought this before I reach for my radio and initiate contact with the monitoring center. The monitoring center is the off-site facility that receives all camera feeds from this building, and that has a live operator on duty at all times, a redundancy in the observation chain that exists precisely for situations where the on-site officer needs a second set of eyes and needs to know what those eyes are seeing. I call the monitoring center, and I give my officer identification, and I ask the operator to pull up monitor 3's current feed and tell me what they see. There is a pause of approximately 4 seconds, the pause of someone pulling up the feed and looking at it, and then the operator says, "Door 7 is closed." I say, "Confirm you are seeing a closed door on the monitor 3 feed." They say, "Yes, confirm, door 7 closed, no anomaly visible." I look at my monitor 3. The door is open. I tell the operator that my on-site feed is showing door 7 open. Another pause. The operator says they are seeing no discrepancy on their end. Door 7 appears closed on the feed they are receiving. I look at my monitor 3. The door is open by 8 inches, and the 8 inches of darkness visible through the gap has not changed in the 2.5 minutes since I first saw it, and I am looking at an open door that the monitoring center is not seeing, and the access control system is not registering. And the only explanation for which is either that my on-site monitor is displaying a cached or corrupted image from an earlier camera cycle, which is a known malfunction mode for some camera systems, or that something has accessed this feed locally and is managing what it shows at different endpoints, which is a known method of defeating security camera systems, and which represents a level of technical sophistication that changes the nature of what I am dealing with from a mechanical anomaly to a deliberate incursion. I tell the operator I am going to physically verify door 7, and I ask them to log the discrepancy and flag the shift supervisor. They confirm. I stand up. I put my hand on my sidearm. I do not draw. I walk out of the control room into the main corridor, and I move toward the southeast corridor, and I am doing what I was trained to do, which is to move toward the problem with the readiness that the problem requires, and the caution that the unknown quantity of the problem demands. 9 years of armed security work has a physical language, and the physical language is in my body right now, in the pace and the scan and the hand position and the breathing, all of it automatic, all of it the accumulated product of the training and the experience, running without requiring my conscious direction, so that my conscious mind is available for the assessment that the situation requires. The southeast corridor is the right-angle corridor that connects the main facility floor to the loading dock area, and door 7 is at the far end of it. And as I enter the southeast corridor, I can see door 7 at a distance of approximately 30 feet, and door 7 is closed. I walk to door 7. It is closed. The handle is in the locked position. I put my hand on it and push, and it does not move. I check the frame, the gap between the door and the frame, the seal, the hinge side. The door is fully closed and locked and shows no signs of having been opened. No scuff marks on the floor on either side, where a door moving over a concrete floor would leave drag marks. No disturbance to the thin layer of construction dust that has settled in the corner of the frame over the months this door has been in use. Dust that would be disturbed by any door movement, and that is undisturbed. The door has not been opened. The door is physically in the state that the access control system says it is in, which is locked. The door on monitor 3 showed it open. The door in physical reality is closed and has not been opened. I walk back to the control room. Monitor 3 shows door 7 closed. I sit down and I look at monitor 3, which shows me a closed door that was showing me an open door 13 minutes ago. A door that the monitoring center never saw open. A door that shows no physical evidence of having been opened. A door for which the access control system shows no access event. And I am sitting in the control room of an ATM servicing center in Waco at 3:27 in the morning with a key in my pocket and a closed door on a monitor that was showing me an open door and a building full of cash and no explanation. I log the incident. I log it fully and precisely, the time of first observation, the duration, the discrepancy with the monitoring center's feed, the physical inspection findings. I log it as a camera system anomaly with potential feed integrity concern, recommending technical review of the monitor 3 display unit and the camera 7 feed pathway. This is the correct log entry. This is the entry that describes the physical facts without the interpretation that the physical facts are pointing toward, which is the interpretation that something entered this building tonight through a method that is not represented in any of the access systems, and that managed the camera feed well enough to prevent the monitoring center from seeing what the on-site monitor saw, but not well enough to prevent the on-site monitor from seeing it, which is either a calibration difference between the feeds or the residue of the brief window before whatever was managing the feeds locked down the monitoring center's view, and which I cannot log because the log requires facts, and the interpretation is not a fact, and the interpretation, if I am right about it. means that something very sophisticated and very deliberate has been in this building tonight and has been careful about it, and has been mostly successful at being careful, except for the 11 minutes on monitor 3 that I saw. I complete my shift. I do my remaining physical rotations at every 90 minutes with a completeness that is more thorough than usual, which is possible because usual is already thorough, because I am the kind of officer who understands that thorough is not an enhancement of the job but the job itself. I find nothing. I find no evidence of entry, no evidence of presence, no evidence of disturbance to any secured area including the vault corridor, nothing that would stand in the log as a confirmed finding. The technical review of the camera system 3 days later finds no malfunction in the monitor 3 display unit and no irregularity in the camera 7 feed pathway. The feed discrepancy is logged as an unexplained momentary display artifact. The incident is closed. I worked 3 more months at that facility after the night of the open door. In those 3 months, I watched every monitor with the specific attention of someone who knows that a monitor can show you something that is real and that no other part of the system will confirm. Something that is there for 11 minutes and then not there. Something that was careful but not careful enough. Something that was in the building for a purpose that the vault's contents make obvious, and that did not complete that purpose because I was watching and made calls and moved toward the problem, and whatever it was decided that the night was not the right night. I know this because nothing was taken. I know this because the vault was intact and the cash was intact and the building was intact, and all of that intactness has one explanation, which is that whatever was in the building on the night of the open door calculated the response time and the response readiness and found the odds insufficient and left, and the leaving was as careful as the entry. And the only record of either is 11 minutes on monitor 3 that a monitoring center in another building never saw and that a technical review found no explanation for, and that I think about every time I sit in front of a bank of monitors at any facility anywhere. Every time I look at a door on a screen, every time the silence of a secured building has a quality that is slightly different from the silence it is supposed to have. Because the silence of a building with someone in it who is not supposed to be there is not the same as the silence of a building with no one in it but you. And 9 years of this work and 1 night in Waco has given me the ability to tell the difference. And I use it every shift in every building, watching every door. There is one more thing I am going to tell you before I close this account. One thing that I have not logged in any incident report, and that I have not discussed with any supervisor, and that I have not told to any colleague in the 9 months since that night. At 3:14 in the morning, in the 30 seconds between when I first saw the open door and when I picked up the radio to call the monitoring center, before I did anything, before I took any professional action, I looked at monitor 3 and I looked at the 8 inches of darkness visible through the open door of door 7. And in the darkness, in the 8-inch gap, something looked back. Not a shape I can describe, not a figure I can outline. The quality of the darkness in the gap was different from the darkness on either side of the gap. The way that the darkness of an occupied space is different from the darkness of an unoccupied space. The way darkness that contains something is different from darkness that contains nothing. And for 30 seconds at 3:14 in the morning, I sat in the control room, and the 8 inches of darkness in the gap of door 7 sat on monitor 3, and we looked at each other. And then I picked up my radio. And by the time the monitoring center confirmed that they were seeing the door closed, the quality of the darkness in the gap had changed, had become the darkness of an unoccupied space, had become nothing again, and the door on monitor 3 had closed itself without any record in any system of ever having been open. Story number 2. Every man in this institution knows my name, and I know none of theirs, and I have walked this tier for 3 years. And I know the sounds of this tier the way I know the sounds of my own breathing. And the sound I am hearing from cell 41 right now is not a sound this tier makes, and I am at the far end of the tier, at the point farthest from the officer station, and farthest from the door and closest to the sound. And the sound is a man's voice, low and sustained, and in a language I cannot identify. Coming from cell 41, which according to my roster is empty, which according to the housing log has been empty for 11 days, since its previous occupant was transferred to a facility in another state. And I am standing in the dark of the tier at 4:17 in the morning, with 1,000 eyes watching me from 100 cells, and one empty cell producing a voice, and my hand is on my radio. But I have not keyed it yet, because what I am going to say when I key, it does not have a shape that the radio language of this institution can accommodate. This job is the job I am going to describe to you as it actually is, not as it is described in the materials the Federal Bureau of Prisons provides to prospective officers, not as it is described in the cultural narratives about corrections work, but as it is. As I have lived it for 3 years on the overnight shift, in a high-security federal facility that I am not going to name, because the naming is not important, and the naming would make some of what I am going to tell you about specific people and specific events, in ways that those people do not deserve, and that would undermine the account by attaching it to specifics that would invite dispute over details. What I am going to tell you about is the experience, which is the thing that does not change with the specific location, which is the thing that every overnight officer in a high-security federal facility carries in a version of what I carry, which is the accumulation of 3 years of 4 a.m. tier walks in a building full of men who have committed the specific category of crimes that put a person in a high-security federal facility, which is a category that begins at serious and has no upper boundary. The overnight tier walk is the central physical task of the overnight shift in a correctional facility of this type. Federal regulations require welfare checks on all inmates at specified intervals, which for high-security facilities means every 30 minutes at minimum, which means the overnight shift is organized around a schedule of walks that covers the full housing unit population at 30-minute intervals across the 8 hours of the shift. A schedule that a person does not consciously plan after the first few weeks, but that the body learns and executes with a physical automaticity that is both efficient and somewhat disconcerting in its own right. The disconcerting quality being that you are doing something significant, walking through a tier of occupied cells in a maximum security federal prison at 4 in the morning, and your body is doing it with the routine ease of a habit, with the physical nonchalance of going to the kitchen for a glass of water. The Federal Correctional Institution where I work has a general population housing unit organized into tiers, each tier a long corridor of cells on both sides, approximately 100 cells per tier, single occupancy in the high security designation, each cell with its own door, its own window, its own contained world inside it where the person assigned to it spends the majority of their time, the majority of their waking and sleeping hours, in a space that is 72 square feet, and that contains everything they have been permitted to keep of their personal world inside the federal system, which is a limited set of items under a specific policy that I enforce and know completely. At 4 in the morning, the tier is the specific quality of dark that institutional lighting on the overnight setting produces, which is not complete darkness but a reduced illumination, enough to see the corridor, enough to see the cell doors, enough to see a person in a cell if they are visible through the window, but not enough to read the expression on a face at any distance, not enough to see what is in the back of a cell, not enough to make the tier feel fully lit, fully visible, fully known. The overnight lighting is the concession between the security requirement of visual welfare checks and the basic human requirement of darkness for sleep, and it produces a compromise that is neither. That is a dim gray corridor of doors that you walk alone at 4 in the morning in the specific sound environment of 100 people in various stages of sleep, snoring and shifting, and the occasional voice of someone in a dream, and the occasional voice of someone not in a dream. The thing that you are not prepared for by the training, the thing that the orientation and the procedures and the policy manuals do not address, is what 1,000 eyes in the dark do to a person over time. I mean this literally, and I mean it as a description of something that has a physical reality in this job that accumulates across shifts in the way that anything accumulates that is applied consistently in one direction. When you walk the tier, you are observed by everyone who is awake, which at 4 in the morning is more people than you would expect, and by some of what you would estimate to be sleeping. And the observation is not the casual awareness of a person registering movement in their environment and returning to their activity. The observation is directed, specific, attentive. The observation of people who have a complex and often adversarial relationship with the category of authority that you represent. People who have processed and reprocessed that relationship in the specific intellectual economy of long incarceration, which is an economy that has a great deal of time and a limited scope of application, and that produces, in some of the men I walk past at 4 in the morning, a quality of attention toward me that I feel physically, that I have felt physically since the first week of this job, and that 3 years have not normalized, that 3 years have instead made more specific, more textured, more differentiated between the observation that is ordinary and the observation that is something else, something that the men in these cells develop in the specific conditions of this environment, in the long hours and the compressed space and the enforced interiority. A quality of observation that I do not have a word for. That is not surveillance. That is more than surveillance. That is the quality of attention of a person who has spent years learning to see things that are not ordinarily seen, who has had no other occupation for those years. The unwritten rules of the overnight tier walk are not the rules in the manual, and are not the rules in the training, and are not the rules that new officers receive in any official context. They are the rules that the veteran officers convey in the specific casual directness of people who have no time for inefficiency on the first week of a new officer's tier assignment. The first rule is that you do not stop on the tier without cause. You maintain your walking pace. You do your window checks at a moving pace, a brief visual of each cell's occupant, and you continue. Stopping without cause, pausing in the middle of the tier without a specific welfare check or intervention reason, produces in the 100 men you are currently walking past an attention that is different from the walking past attention, and that is not manageable alone. I have seen a new officer stop to adjust his radio on the tier and have the quality of the corridor change in under 10 seconds in a way that required a deliberate response to resolve. You do not stop. The second unwritten rule is that you do not respond to your name. It will be said. It will be said in every register, from the casual to the urgent to the conspiratorial, from behind closed cell doors, from the darkness at the back of cells where you cannot see the speaker, sometimes from cells you would estimate to be occupied by someone asleep, and you do not respond, not with a word, not with a turn of the head, not with any modification of your pace or your direction. You walk. Your name said from behind a locked cell door on a tier at 4 in the morning is not a name being said by a person with a legitimate welfare need, because legitimate welfare needs have a specified communication mechanism that does not involve calling names in the dark, and responding to names in the dark on a tier at 4 in the morning is how you become the kind of officer who is managed by the population rather than managing it. You do not respond. The third unwritten rule, the one delivered last, the one the veteran officer who gave me the others paused before delivering, is this. On this tier on this unit, some cells at 4 in the morning sound different from other cells at 4 in the morning in a way that is not explained by the occupant or by any physical characteristic of the cell. And when you pass a cell that sounds different, you log your visual check and you keep walking and you do not slow down and you do not indicate that you noticed. Because indicating that you noticed is the thing that has produced, in the past, situations that required intervention. And the intervention for a cell that sounds different at 4 in the morning is not an intervention that the training covers. I asked the veteran what kind of different. He said, like there are more people in it than there should be. He said this in the flat tone that experience produces in people who have delivered information of this kind enough times to have stripped the delivery of the register that the information would carry if it were new. I said, "What do you mean more people?" He said, "You'll know what I mean." He was correct. Cell 41 is the cell I am standing outside at 4:17 in the morning, and cell 41 is empty according to the roster, and has been empty for 11 days, and the voice inside it is male and sustained, and in a language I cannot identify, and the quality of the voice is the quality of someone engaged in a long, uninterrupted speech. Not a conversation, not a reaction, a prepared address, a delivery of content that has been prepared and is being delivered to an audience, and the audience, from outside the door at 4:17, sounds like it is inside the cell, sounds like there are responses to the delivery that I cannot hear because they are below the threshold of what passes through the cell door. And I am outside the door of an empty cell listening to an occupied cell, and my hand is on my radio and I have not keyed it. I walk past. This is what you do. This is the unwritten rule, and I understand the rule now in the way that the veteran conveyed it, in the way that you understand a rule when you are in the situation the rule was written for. I walk past cell 41 at my normal tier pace, and I do not slow and I do not indicate, and the voice inside continues at its sustained delivery pace, and does not change as I pass the door, and does not follow me down the tier, which is the detail I need before I can complete the pass without response. The detail that tells me the cell is doing what cells sometimes do on this tier at 4 in the morning, which is contain something that is not the assigned occupant, and that does not track the officer, but that conducts its business in the cell for reasons that have nothing to do with the officer's presence, and that will continue after the officer's pass, and that will be gone by morning, which is the pattern, which is how it always resolves. The morning shift finding cells exactly as the roster and the housing log and the physical reality say they should be. But I am at 4:17 in the morning and not at morning, and cell 41 is doing what it is doing, and I have passed it, and I am continuing my walk, and now I am at cell 47, and cell 47 is the cell of a man named in the housing log by a number, which is how I know him, by his number and by his face through the cell window. A man I have been walking past for 3 years. A man who is always asleep at 4 in the morning, who sleeps with the depth of someone who has made peace with their environment in the specific way that long incarceration requires, and cell 47 is lit. The light in cell 47 is on. the occupant's personal lamp, which he has never had on at 4 in the morning in 3 years. And I check through the window, and the man is sitting on the edge of his bunk, and he is facing the door, and he is looking at me, and his expression is not the expression of a man who has just woken, not the expression of insomnia or distress. It is the expression of a man who has been waiting, who has been sitting on the edge of his bunk with the light on waiting for me to pass this cell. And when I look through the window, he looks at me and he says, through the door, in the flat, quiet voice of someone delivering a specific piece of information they have prepared, he says, "Do not go back to 41. That is all he says. He says it once, in the tone of a person completing a task they were asked to complete, and then he turns off the lamp and the cell is dark and I continue my walk. I do not go back to 41. I complete the tier and I return to the officer station, and I log my welfare checks, and the check for cell 41 I log as visual confirmed, no concerns, which is the log entry that an empty cell receives, which is technically accurate because no one is assigned to that cell, and the welfare check for an empty cell is by definition no concerns. I do not log the voice. I do not log the cell 47 conversation. I do not log anything about 417 in the morning on this tier, because the log does not have a field for voices in empty cells, or for messages delivered by inmates on behalf of whatever is in the empty cell that is telling them to tell you not to come back. I walk this tier still. I have walked it since that night, and I walk it with the professional completeness that the job requires. Every 30-minute interval, every cell door, every window check, every log entry. Cell 41 has had 3 subsequent occupants in the 9 months since that night, assigned as the housing needs of the facility require, and none of those 3 occupants have reported anything unusual about the cell, have made no complaints, have made no special requests for cell changes, have served their time in cell 41 without incident. The cell is a cell. It is 72 square feet of federal property, and it is a cell. But I do not linger at the door of cell 41 on any walk. I pass it at pace, at my standard tier pace, my visual through the window completed and logged, and my feet moving before the log entry has finished forming in my mind. And the cell is always what it is supposed to be, always holding its assigned occupant in whatever state of sleep or wakefulness the 4 a.m. hour produces. And the voice I heard on the night of the 17th is not there on any subsequent pass. And I walk past and I continue, and I reach the end of the tier and I turn and I walk back. And I do this every 30 minutes across every overnight shift, and I will do it for as long as I work this unit. And the man in cell 47, who has never had his lamp on at 4 in the morning before that night, has never had it on since. And he looks at me on my passes with the same sleeping face he has always had, and we have never spoken about it, and we will not speak about it. Because he delivered the message he was asked to deliver, and the message was sufficient, and I received it, and I walk the tier, and I do not go back to 41. Story number 3. The figure on camera 44 in the remote facility in Antwerp has been walking the second floor corridor for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, and it does not have a face, and I have been a GSOC analyst for 6 years, and I have watched more camera feeds from more facilities in more countries than I can currently enumerate, and I have seen camera artifacts and lens flare and IR sensor glitches, and every category of image anomaly that surveillance equipment produces, and none of those categories covers what I am looking at on camera 44 right now, which is a person-shaped thing moving at a human pace through a corridor in a building that my access records show as unoccupied, moving with the specific purposeful directness of someone who knows where they are going and intends to get there. And where its face should be, there is nothing. There is the absence of face in the specific way that something that has never had a face lacks one, rather than the way a person with their back turned lacks one. And the absence is not a sensor artifact because the rest of the figure is rendered with complete clarity. The clothing, the hands at the sides, the feet on the corridor floor, everything except the face, which is absent in a way that is not blur and is not occlusion and is not any image processing artifact I have vocabulary for. I need to explain what a GSOC is before I explain what I saw in one, because the term is not familiar to most people, and the context is the thing that makes the experience the specific kind of frightening that it is, which is the kind of frightening that is not immediate physical danger, but something colder than that, something that sits in the analytical mind rather than in the body's threat response. Something that is received through a screen in a well-lit room in a security operations center in San Jose by a person whose job is to process exactly this kind of input, and who has, for the first time in 6 years, encountered input that the processing cannot resolve into any known category. The Global Security Operations Center is the nerve center of a global security firm's monitoring operations, a facility staffed around the clock by analysts who watch camera feeds, access control data, alarm systems, and other security inputs from client facilities across multiple countries and time zones, providing real-time monitoring and response coordination for clients who cannot or choose not to maintain their own on-site security monitoring capability. I am one of those analysts. I have been one of them for 6 years, working the overnight shift, which at my San Jose location means I am covering facilities primarily in Europe, where the business day is beginning or in progress while it is the middle of the night here, and in the Asia-Pacific region, where the business day is ending or has ended. I watch screens. I watch a very large number of screens. I am good at watching screens in the way that a person who has done it for 6 years develops goodness at it, which is the goodness of a very finely tuned pattern recognition system that has been trained on millions of hours of camera footage, and that can identify in under 2 seconds the difference between a camera glitch and a person, between a moving shadow and an intrusion, between the normal night behavior of an unoccupied building, which is a set of behaviors that every building has and that has its own pattern and rhythm, and the behavior of a building that has acquired an unregistered occupant. The facility in Antwerp is a commercial office building, 4 stories, approximately 8,000 square meters of office and conference room space, owned by a client whose business involves regional headquarters operations for a logistics company with European distribution. The building is a standard commercial facility in every respect that the client data describes. A building with a standard access control system, and a standard camera array, and a standard alarm configuration, and a standard monitoring contract with my firm covering the overnight hours when the building is unoccupied, which is every night after the last building employee or contractor has exited and the system has been secured. The Antwerp facility has been on my monitoring rotation for 14 months, and in those 14 months, it has been an entirely unremarkable client installation. The building behavior exactly what commercial office buildings in that region and of that type produce, which is nothing, which is the correct output of a secured and unoccupied building, which is what I am paid to confirm every night, and which I have confirmed every night for 14 months without incident. The first thing that is wrong on the night of the event is the access log. The building has been secured by the last building staff member at 18:30 local time, which is 9:30 a.m. my time, and the access log has shown no events since that closure. No entries, no exits, no failed attempts, no alarm triggers. the clean log of an unoccupied secured building. At 23:44 local time, which is 14:44 my time, the access log records an internal door event on the second floor, specifically the door between the central stairwell and the east corridor. And internal door events in a secured building are the specific category of access log event that does not occur in unoccupied buildings, because internal doors in unoccupied commercial buildings do not open, because there is no one inside to open them. Because the external access control prevents occupancy from occurring without generating an access record, and the access log for the Antwerp facility shows no external access event since 1830 and shows an internal door event at 23:44. And the combination of those two facts is what the access log processing alert system flags and delivers to my console as an anomaly requiring analyst review. I pull up the Antwerp camera array. The building has 22 cameras covering interior and exterior. I am cycling through them systematically, beginning with the exterior cameras to confirm perimeter integrity, which is intact. No person visible at any access point, no vehicle, no external presence of any kind. And then moving to the interior cameras. And I am on my fourth interior camera, which is camera 44, the east corridor second floor, when I see the figure. It is walking away from me in the corridor, walking toward the east end of the second floor where the senior management offices are located, and its back is to the camera, and I can see the back of a head where a head should be, hair visible, a dark jacket, trousers, shoes on the corridor floor, the complete visual presentation of a person walking with purpose through an office corridor. I flag the feed for my shift supervisor, and I begin the escalation protocol, which is the sequence of steps that an unauthorized presence in a client facility triggers, which begins with internal notification and client contact and preparation for law enforcement coordination. I am entering the client contact information when the figure turns. It turns at the end of the corridor to enter the executive office suite, and as it turns, the camera captures its profile, and then as it continues turning toward the office suite door, I see its face, and the face is not there. I do not mean the face is blurred. I do not mean the image is degraded. I mean the space where the face occupies the same position in the image that a face would occupy, and has the same ambient lighting falling on it that falls on the jacket and the hands and the back of the head, and the rendering quality is the same across all of these surfaces, and where the face should be is a surface that is rendering correctly and contains nothing. Not a dark space, not a white space, not a corrupted pixel block. The correct rendering of the correct image of the front of a head from which everything that constitutes a face has been removed, that has never had what is removed, that the camera is showing correctly and showing as absent. I call my shift supervisor. She comes to my console and she looks at the feed for 20 seconds and she says, "What camera?" I tell her, camera 44, Antwerp East Corridor second floor. She takes my mouse and she cycles through the other interior cameras, looking for the figure in adjacent spaces, and we find it on camera 47, the East Office Suite interior camera. And on camera 47, the figure is standing in the center of the executive office suite and facing the camera, and the face is not there, and the figure is standing still, which is the first time since I began observing it that it has been still. And it is standing still and facing camera 47 and facing us and my supervisor. And I are sitting in San Jose looking at a screen, showing us a building in Antwerp and a thing standing in the executive suite facing the camera without a face. And the thing is still, and we are still, and the camera is still. And for 7 seconds, nothing on the feed changes. Then the figure moves. It walks toward camera 47, toward us, at the same purposeful pace as in the corridor. And as it walks toward the camera, the faceless space of the head fills more of the frame and becomes more specifically itself. The specific quality of the nothing that is where a face should be. The absence that is not blankness but is the absence of something that was never present. And my supervisor says, "Kill the feed." And I cut the Antwerp camera array from my console, and for 3 seconds we are looking at the blank space where the feeds were. And my supervisor says, "Log what we saw as a camera system malfunction. Suspected IR sensor array failure. Client to be notified for technical review." And I look at her and she is looking at the blank feed space and she says it again. "Log it as a camera system malfunction." I log it as a camera system malfunction. The technical review of the Antwerp camera system takes place 4 days later. The review team finds no malfunction in any component of the camera array. The findings are that all 22 cameras are functioning within specification. All sensor arrays are performing correctly. All image processing firmware is current and uncorrupted. The review finds no evidence of the image anomaly we observed. The review finds, additionally, that the internal door event logged in the access control system on the night in question, the door between the central stairwell and the east corridor at 2344, has no corresponding physical finding, no evidence that the door moved, the door mechanism showing no operational event in its own internal log, despite the access control system's record. The technical review closes with a finding of access control log anomaly, cause undetermined, camera review negative. The Antwerp facility returns to normal monitoring rotation. I watch the Antwerp feeds every night I'm on shift. I have watched them for 6 months since that night, and the building has been what commercial office buildings are, which is nothing, which is correct, which is the output of a secured and unoccupied facility generating no anomalies and requiring no escalation. I watch every feed with the attention that 6 years and 1 night in Antwerp have produced in me, which is an attention that knows the difference between a camera artifact and a person, and that now knows the difference between a person and a thing that presents on camera as a person in every respect except the face, and that knowledge lives in the part of my pattern recognition system that has been updated by one event in a way that a pattern recognition system updates when it receives input in a category it did not previously have. And the category is now there, resident in the system, available for pattern matching, and I have not matched it again in 6 months. And I watch the feeds with the complete and continuous attention of someone who knows that the absence of a match is not the absence of the category, that the category exists and has been documented, that it walked a corridor in Antwerp for 3 minutes and 40 seconds and turned to face a camera and walked toward us, and that wherever it went after my supervisor cut the feed, it went with the purposeful directness of something that knew where it was going, and that I look for every night in every feed from every building in every time zone, not because I expect to find it, but because 6 years of this work has taught me that the thing that requires finding is always the thing you were not looking for until you already saw it, and you only see it once before your supervisor tells you what to log it as. And then you watch for it forever, in every corridor, in every camera, in every correctly rendered image of the front of a head from which everything that constitutes a face is absent, waiting for the night it walks toward another camera, and the feed stays live long enough to see where it goes.